panel discussion with Apoorv Saxena on trends in AI for financial services. People are, looks like people are still trickling in. So let's do this. Let's give it a couple of minutes for people to come in and settle down. But in the meantime, let me get started with just a quick poll to understand what people, where people are coming from. That will help Apoorv and me better curate our questions on what we can ask Apoorv around the subject of AI in financial services. So, as people are trickling in, here's a quick question just to better understand the audience. Could you help me understand how proficient you are with data science, machine learning, AI? So, if you are a complete novice, a complete beginner in data science, machine learning, AI concepts, say if in your YouTube chat, could you just put 1, right? If you're somewhat proficient, if you have some working knowledge of AI data science, you can say 2. And if you're an expert, of course, if you're extremely a proficient expert in the space, please say 3. So again, just trying to get a sense for how, what's your experience level with data science. So 1 is a complete novice, 2 is you have a working knowledge, and 3 is you're an expert. I see some answers coming in. All right, let me just check here. I think people are either 1 or 2, mostly. Most of them are have some basic understanding of data science, so that's good to know. All right, so that's good. That'll help us curate what experience level people have. People seem to be either complete beginners in data science, just getting started, or have some experience. All right, so something good to note for Apoorv as we start asking him the questions. Another quick question. Could you just also add in the industry you're from? So how many of you are from financial services industry, or if you're from manufacturing or retail, and that's by the way perfectly fine. We expect people from diverse industries to be here. So if you're from IT, financial services, manufacturing, retail, e-commerce, please go ahead and add in which industry you're from. I'd just love to get to know you better. All right. Probably people, I see some IT industry mostly. Let me check here. All right, so it looks like we have a healthy mix. We have folks who are in financial services, but also, I guess, consulting. Okay. So it looks like it's a pretty widespread of folks from different industries, and that's what I would expect. Financial services, retail, looks like a lot of folks from retail, folks from IT, mostly IT, and that's good to know as well, because something that I'll be introducing Apoorv very soon, but something that he has done is he spent a good solid part of his corporate career leading AI services at Google, at Google Cloud, a big cloud service providers. So that's good to know, and we'll definitely ask Apoorv to draw on his experience from the IT space. All right, and with that, let's get started. So thanks everyone for joining, and thanks of course to Apoorv. Apoorv, thank you for joining us. Let me quickly give everybody a quick introduction to Apoorv here. Apoorv is the global head of AI at JP Morgan Chase. So he heads all of artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies across JP Morgan's asset and wealth management business, as well as the AI and machine learning services as a whole across all of JP Morgan, branches and businesses. So clearly, no pressure, Apoorv, but a lot of responsibility on his plate as he's helping JP Morgan be a great success story in using AI and machine learning in financial services. But even before that, though, Apoorv is no stranger to the space of AI. He used to head. He was the head of product for cloud AI at Google's for GCP, Google Cloud Platform, which, as you all know, is now at 12 billion. Last year, it's a $12 billion run rate in the cloud space. It's probably the fastest growing cloud company, and catching up with AWS and Azure, although they started a little later. And I think a large reason for that is the cloud AI services that they brought in, which was spearheaded by Apoorv. So some great experience that you can draw on from there, especially for those of you who I see come from the IT space. Prior to that, he was an entrepreneur. He founded Okati, which was bought by Google. And he also founded AI Frontiers, a nonprofit which helps evangelize AI and how AI can be used across different industries. So something I'm sure you can draw from, even for those who come from different industry backgrounds. Of course, before that, I know Apoorv also from back at his days at IIT Bombay. From there, he went on to do his master's at Purdue. He did an MBA from Wharton, worked at some amazing companies, Cisco, McKinsey, and of course at Google. And now, he's spearheading the work at JP Morgan Chase. So without much ado, Apoorv, welcome to our panel discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Milind, for having me. Super excited about this opportunity and great to see what you are doing at Great Learning and what you and Mohan have done. Have been an observer from outside and really excited about this opportunity.
Yep, absolutely. Apoorv, I'll also encourage the audience to keep asking more questions that we can ask Apoorv. Given his background, I'm sure he can cover a wide range of questions that you may have. But some of you already sent in questions beforehand that you had for Apoorv, and thank you for that. And I tried to compile it, and I thought I'll ask these questions one by one. And we can have Apoorv, draw from his experience on it. But feel free to keep adding more as you listen to what Apoorv has to say. Apoorv, so here's a common question that I get. People understand financial services industry, and now they're hearing about AI, right? And especially the buzzword fintech. So could you help us walk us through the history of using technology in finance, in financial services, and especially how AI is now changing that landscape? How is AI being used? And if you could just paint a picture and walk us through the history of technology and in particular AI being used in financial services.
That's a great question. So financial services and technology have been very deeply intertwined, not just in the recent past, but for the last 100, 200 years since the financial industries has been in play. Like the famous example is ATMs, which financial services adopted significantly, were run on mainframes in the back end. And one of the biggest customers of IBM mainframe came from financial services industry. And so financial industry fundamentally believes that there's almost every 15 to 20 years, there's phenomenal development that happened in the technology industry that transform how financial services are delivered to customers. And so this has happened multiple times, and it's happening again now. And we can go into the details of what is triggering that new wave of update. And so to give you an example, as recent past, if you probably heard about in especially trading, then take just one example. Just 25 years back, most of the trading in the stock exchanges was through a manual process. A human was involved in the process, or it was very rudimentary electronic trading. And almost today, 76 to 78% of trading that happens on a stock exchange is not only, first of all, is 100% is electronic, not a single human is involved, but 70% of those trades are executed by algorithms. And so as a result, financial industry in the last 15, 20 years, just in the trading side of the business, the sell side, have invested tremendously in automating themselves and using AI. Of course, it's analytics to data science to business intelligence, now much more sophisticated algorithms. So we can talk about the journey as well during the conversation. But as I said, these two have been working very, technology and financials working together to give you a few more stats. Of all, when I was at Google, the biggest purchaser of technology services was always financial services and healthcare. So if I am not wrong, 15 to 20% of all IT spend across all industry is done by financial services. So financial services has tremendously invested and also leveraged the latest and the greatest technology for a long time. So nothing new, and then the same thing is happening with the advent of AI and public cloud.
Great! Wow, I love that stat that you mentioned about 70% of trades are being done already, by algorithms. In fact, it actually made me think about this one question, which has also come up. As you know, a lot of folks here are looking at various career opportunities. And in fact, Pritish here, I think immediately asked that question when he quoted that stat, by the way, about whether he can predict stocks using AI. But but before we even get to that one, just curious, Apoorv, because you graduated from Wharton, I graduated from Kellogg, and a lot of my friends after their MBA went into the trading space on a trading desk. Which at one point was a very lucrative career. But now when you're saying that 70% of trades are being done by machines, and I'm guessing that probably is only increasing, what do you see as the impact on the job landscape? Would you still advise anyone to go become a trader?
Definitely, yes. I think just like any other industry, when you apply AI or technology in general, the kind of decisions you make and what you use the technology for changes. And 10 years back, a lot of the traders, the kind of activities they were doing are getting increasingly automated. But they are still needed and deeply needed to draw on insights and make decisions, which AI either cannot make or is not trusted enough to make those decisions. So in my view, what has happened in the last 10, 15 years, and trading floors are being reinvented across Wall Street. At one time, you would have thousands of 2,000 to 3,000 traders on a trading floor. UBS had one famous, I remember during my Wharton days, I had a visit to the UBS trading floor in Stamford, and it's almost the size of a football field. And
Wow.
in the next 10 years, you will probably not see that size of trading floors anymore. What you will see is still traders, but involved in very different kind of decisions, which require strong intuition, requires understanding of very complex decision processes. So I would say it's just the nature of what you will do on Wall Street will tremendously change, but not the job functions. The job functions of a trader, buy-side analyst, sell-side analyst will remain the same because humans will always be required. So it's just, if looking from a job perspective, there are two ways you will look at. And you are already seeing that in the way senior leadership is being created in a lot of these banks. Earlier, you could rise up through the ranks at a bank with a very limited understanding of technology. These days, that is, if you don't understand technology and you don't know how to work with technology, is increasingly seen as a disadvantage. So a combination of tech and business is probably what's the sweet spot. That was probably not true just a few years back. And you will see that some of the great hires. Like I'm working at JP Morgan. I would have never thought about, as a technologist, probably seeing a thriving career at a bank, coming from a very tech specific background. But you're increasingly seeing people like me being hired not only at JP Morgan, but at other large financial services from across the world. Is a testament to that the environment and the leadership is changing along with the job roles.
Right, great. No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I still remember it was big news when JP Morgan announced that they are bringing you on board, and there was a lot of chatter around what's this guy who's this Google guy who's heading this thing called AI at Google. What's he doing? In the finance space, where as you rightly said, people kind of work their way up through the trading desk. And sure enough, I think that is a great case in point that what financial services industries are now looking for from a job perspective is not just someone who understands the domain, but who also brings in a solid understanding of technology, just because they're so strongly intertwined. And I also like, by the way, what you mentioned, which is that look, while yes, AI is changing in this case of trading, how it's automating everything. That doesn't mean the job of a human will go away. Humans are still needed. We call that as human in the loop. You still need that judgment call, that decision making that humans make. And I'd love to maybe in a subsequent question dig deeper into the role that humans play vis-a-vis AI. But just shifting back a little bit from just looking at the bigger picture, what are the applications, if you were to paint the landscape today, of how AI is being used across various aspects of financial services business? Be it customer service, be it the trading desk that you just spoke of, be it processing loans. Could you give us a landscape of how currently, of course, it's a separate question about what the future beholds for us, but currently, how is AI being used across, or what are the common applications that you see of AI in financial services?
So, and how financial services are using AI is very similar in terms of pattern across how other industries are using AI in a sort of very 30,000 feet point of view. And because this is when I was running cloud AI verticals at Google, I was building solutions for AI for financial industry, healthcare industry, industrials, manufacturing, and so on and so forth. So I had like pretty broad understanding, and a lot of the use cases are very common. And then there's a whole class of use cases or applications which are very specific to the financial industry. And I would say, when I look at 5 years out, what we are doing, how AI is being applied, is probably 15 to 20% of the potential. So there's a huge potential, in my view, how AI will be applied. So we can talk about both. In terms of answering your first question, where it is being applied today, it's AI is applied across the front office, back office, and in the middle office, as they say. So then front office, how you better targeting of your ads, whether you're like, if you've seen a Chase credit card ad, it's probably driven by some AI in the background in terms of better understanding of who the customer profile is, personalizing the message, and AI is used there. So again, this is nothing new or unique to financial industry. It is how ads space and advertising and marketing has evolved over the last 10 years. And again, I would keep emphasizing financial industry in terms of ad spend is one of the biggest spender in both online ads and on TV ads. So as a result, again, very sophisticated profiling, sophisticated targeting, messaging, tailoring, so on and so forth is done by AI. So that's one example of in the front office. Other example, as I said, in the front office is trading. I think I want to be cautious in terms of how, and don't want to oversell how much AI is used in making trade decisions. I think there are points where parts of the trading decision are completely automated, but big passes are still not automated. AI is used to inform the decision of a trader, but the trader in a lot of cases still makes the final call. So that's in the front office. In the other sort of areas where traditionally financial services have used AI is, for example, in fraud. It's a very classic example of as the number of transactions are increasingly all of these are happening without a card present, in the sense no human is involved. This is where online payments are increasing. There's the level of sophistication of fraud has increased tremendously, and this is where you cannot use traditional approaches. So AI has been used very tremendously. Like knowledge graphs is a classic example of use of knowledge graph to come up with very sophisticated understanding of where the transaction is originating, who is originating the transaction, and understanding of the entities involved, and so on and so forth, beyond what is available through just the payment network is increasingly used in AI. So that's one. And the third piece, again, very traditional operations, back office. Banks have tremendously large operations teams. Out of the 250,000 employees, a big part of JP Morgan employees are in operations. And what are operations? Operations, this is contact center, call centers, all the way to processing of checks, understanding, doing fraud detection, so on and so forth, and settlement, you can name it. So this is a huge area of how a bank works. And you are seeing AI being applied across the board in driving efficiencies, improving. So one example, one of the products I built at Google was Google Contact Center AI. We are looking at how an AI can help and assist a contact center agent in answering a call, customer call, much more in a way, either fundamentally completely automating the call with a very sophisticated human sounding voice at the other end, or which understands not just like, hey, press 1 for payment, press 2 for maintenance, and so on and so forth. It's a lot more sophisticated. And not only automating, but also on the other hand, assisting the agent in real time as they are answering the customer call. So that's a classic example of how AI is being applied and we are doing all of that across the board. And I've seen just not JP Morgan, a lot of other companies in the space are doing the same. Hope that helps answer pretty broad.
No, I love it. I love how you walked us through, these three broad buckets: the front end, there's the middle layer, and then there's the back end, and how in each of them, AI is touching different aspects of it. And what I also like is the point you made that, look, this is nothing about financial services, right? It's and drawing from your examples at Google, for example, on the back end, what you mentioned around operations and call center operations in particular. Yes, financial services is one of the big consumers of that. Clearly, they have huge call centers. You give the example of a football field, but it's just as relevant, in insurance, in healthcare, in retail, right? So everything that financial services may be the one that's at the forefront of it because they feel the most dire need to innovate there faster. But for all you entrepreneurs in this group, if you're in healthcare or if you're in retail, the same, maybe an opportunity is to take what's being innovated in the financial services space and apply it to your domain. So I like that observation that you made around how this is applicable across industries. Apoorv, I'd love to, it almost tempted me to ask this question. You said that, yes, this is how it's being used today, the whole landscape, the front end, the back end, the middle layer. But you made this comment that, well, however, I feel only 15 to 20% of the potential has really been used. And that's very interesting. So there's still 80% of work that you feel can be done, innovation that can be brought into financial services is still waiting for grabs for the entrepreneurs in this call. That's good to know. Could you walk us through, what does your crystal ball say? Where is that 80% of work going to happen? How is AI going to disrupt financial services?
Happy to answer. So I'll take an entrepreneur's lens to this question. Being myself started a company in this space. So as an entrepreneur, you're always looking for, especially when you're competing with incumbents, which have been like supplying technology to large companies for ages. You have to have an edge, and usually an edge comes in when industry is going through a transitionary phase. And what I call and these transitionary phase don't happen overnight. They happen once in 15 to 20 years time frame. And in my view, financial services is going through that, is going early stages of going through that transformation, driven by cloud adoption of cloud and AI in building the overall tech stack of a bank. So in my view, almost every part of the financial services stack is going to be unbundled and rewritten and imagined in the next 10 to 15 years across the board. And it's not nothing new. It had happened before when the PC era happened and the internet era happened. Same sort of problems were reinvented and rewritten for the PC era and for the internet era and the mobile era. And so same thing will happen in the cloud and AI era. I tie these two together because these waves are happening in parallel. Of course, in some cases, purely a cloud adoption that is driving it. In some cases, an AI is enabling that cloud adoption. So I will bundle them for this discussion, but there are definitely nuances to these. So that's the opportunity for entrepreneurs. So as you're looking at it, traditionally, how you used to provide services, payment is a classic example, which is being completely reimagined with mobile payments taking off in India and China in particular. As you are seeing a lot of activities happening in this space. Alipay is going public on almost a $200-300 billion valuation, bigger than most of the banks in the world. And that is purely a payment, started as a payment service, mobile to mobile payment service, and then has evolved into something. And if you imagine a payment network being valued at $200 billion was probably not possible just a few years back, but it is possible now. So that's just one page. So as entrepreneurs, as you're looking at it, the way I will look at it is look at the financial services stack. Financial services is a pretty big part of the economy. In the US, it's around 10 to 12%. Globally, it's probably around that 10% of the overall economy. I think it's second largest only to healthcare. And every part of the financial services stack, whether it's banking, checking, savings account, loans, mortgage, payments, B2B payment, B2C payment, asset management, wealth management, trading, buy side, sell side, all of these are going to be reinvented using cloud and AI in the next, and those are just the enabling technology. So in my view, that's the reason I say the 15-20% sort of opportunities just tapped upon, because just look at the spend on AI and cloud in these firms. It's still very small compared to all the conversations that are happening. So I think the huge opportunity. Other area, I think, as entrepreneurs, you look at it, we talked about AI. As I said, a lot of the early application of AI and what I call cross-cutting, not specific to financial services, but that's how it's getting started. That will not the way it will be. So you will see robo-advisor is a classic example of how advisory is being now rewritten or sort of reimagined using AI. The early versions that exist today are, frankly speaking, pretty rudimentary and pretty funny and not that very sophisticated, but that level of sophistication is going to increase tremendously in the next 4 to 5 years. And so that's just one example. So verticalization of AI is going to happen. And if you are starting a company in this space, this is rather than building a horizontal AI company, which say does call centers across, there's still opportunity, don't get me wrong, but I think that opportunity was there 3 to 4 years back. In reimagining call centers using AI. I think there's quite a few startups there, but I will look at it, verticalize your AI application in the domain. In financial services, there's quite a few domains that are still need to be disrupted. So that's how I see this space evolving. But this is once in a 15, 20 year opportunity. It's going to be 5 to 10 year, multi-billion dollar, even $1 trillion. Again, haven't done the market sizing on anything like this. And so as an entrepreneur, you're always looking for this opportunity.
I love it. Yeah, you had us at the trillion when you said multi-trillion dollars. So clearly, there's a lot to grow the pie here for all of us who are interested in innovating. And by the way, for those of you who may not know about us at Great Learning, one of the things is our programs are designed to help learners build those skills to innovate, right? So we are always pushing the envelope in terms of how you can take these skills that you're learning in AI and then introduce you to problems, open problems in financial services and healthcare, what have you. And we always want to have you bring some innovation and, help foster the future entrepreneur. So it's good to know. It's good to know that there's opportunity galore in the financial services space. But Apoorv, as you were saying this, there were questions. In fact, there's this question from King Shuk, who's saying, "Well, I get that. So clearly, a lot of opportunity, and there's a reason clearly why now it all makes sense why J.P. Morgan decided to do whatever it takes to get you over from from a tech company like Google." But that also brings up the question for entrepreneurs in this room so is this innovation mostly going to be coming from these big players, these big banks, or is there room for us entrepreneurs, the scrappy ones, the hungry ones, to make a mark? Or do you think it's a winners takes all? These big banks, your Goldman Sachs of the world, will just come in and just leverage everything else they have and then add these innovations on top of it?
So I think it's very difficult to predict who will be a winner in these kind of huge transition that happen, especially driven by tech. And this has happened in like, I can look at examples where the incumbents have adapted very well to transitions like this. And there are a lot of examples where the incumbents haven't adopted very well to these kind of transitions. So I think the jury is out there, and it's very difficult to predict. And I think important thing to know as an entrepreneur, you don't start with those sort of assumptions as given. You are, in my view, as an entrepreneur, there's enough opportunity to build a fairly good business in this business as a startup because there's huge wide open spaces. And you are going to be differentiating not on scale in the beginning, but on your technology and your speed to execution, where the big firms are going to always differentiate themselves using the scale. And I think, so I would not be especially discouraged as an entrepreneur in this space. In my view, there's a huge opportunity across the board. And then who knows how the incumbents are able to catch up or adapt to themselves well. And I think there's also a whole element of regulation here that need to be, if you're an entrepreneur in this space, I would, especially in the financial services, it will be amiss for me not to mention the huge part that regulation and compliance plays. And I think if you're thinking in this space, not having a good understanding of that is going to be, it's detrimental to you. And if you understand that well, it's going to be a huge differentiator. For example, I will give you, when I was at Google, data privacy is probably one of the most important things that we looked at, but the level at which we use data privacy and associated regulations in the banking industry is orders of magnitude more complex than I saw at the technology industry. And as a result, if you're building something for the financial services, if you don't take into account data privacy at scale, so it's not going to help you differentiate. As a result, you're seeing a lot of privacy preserving AI tooling being developed, especially thinking of financial services as a first customer, but of course, these are applicable across the board. But a lot of innovation is happening in that space. Other area to think about is specific to AI, as a lot of decisions in the financial service industry, if they are driven by AI, have to be explained to the regulators. We should be able to, as a bank, be able to explain why we made that particular loan to this particular person and be able to justify all the iterations of the models, if you used any AI model in that decision making, how those iterations over time with additional data was informed the decision. And it's not just a requirement, it's a regulatory compliance requirement. Probably not the case in the case of, say, Google or Facebook's of the world. So if you are building an AI for the financial services industry, and if you don't build in explainability of the AI as part of the core offering, you will not be able to differentiate yourself in this space. So I think so. If you're an entrepreneur, or even frankly speaking, a big company, doesn't matter, trying to sell into the financial industry, or financial institution trying to build technology in this space in-house, you have to have those sort of regulatory compliance and into account.
Yep. No, this is great. You're absolutely right around regulations. And you mentioned about loan. One of the things that we see that, in fact, we have projects, hands-on projects, where we get people to build applications which help predict if somebody can default on a loan, but also a whole lot of other things on whether you should, even think about giving them a loan in the first place and so on. And I know that's a big problem that AI can definitely help solve. You also brought up about regulations and your example of Google Cloud and how privacy was a big thing. And I know that for a fact. I've used GCP as well. And I love the features they've introduced around how to make sure, for those of you who may not be aware about all the regulations around, GDPR, California now has new regulations. Regulations are coming all over. In India, a lot of regulations. And these big cloud providers like Google Cloud are adapting to that. They're helping you better track and make sure that you are adhering, that you're complying with all the various regulations across different industries. Healthcare has HIPAA regulations, financial has, the Sarbanes-Oxley and a whole bunch of other regulations, right? So regulation is big, which also brings me to another question, Apoorv. A few questions that came out from Satish, from DP. And these are, since you brought up cloud, and especially in your past life, you were a cloud guy, you were the cloud guy. Do you see these, you mentioned about Alipay, right, as someone who's disrupting the payment space. Any thoughts on, do you think the cloud guys, your Amazons of the world, your Google Clouds, your Azure, would be the ones who would, you would see the next wave of disruption coming from them? Would they be the ones becoming the next big, Goldman Sachs of the world? How do you see these guys entering the market of financial services?
So I think it's a difficult question to answer. Who will be first of all, who will play into this space, and then who will be the winner? I think there are two sort of questions to your. If I have to subdivide, I do believe traditionally financial services were offered by what you call traditional financial institutions. I think that will no longer be the case in going forward. I think that's partly, and you are seeing increasingly tech companies offering Apple Card is an example, especially in the payment industry, and especially large tech companies which have relationship with customers, direct relationship with the customer. Are increasingly feel and are open to offering financial services directly to the customer because they own the customer relationship. The customer trusts them, and so that I think so you will see that happening more and more. I don't see that is going to go away, but along with those services also comes amazing amount of regulatory and compliance risk that you have to bear, and it's an open question in my view. And again, right. I can only give my opinion that whether Google wants to be regulated like a bank, where every check-in, code check-in, potentially has to be open for a regulator to understand and ask, hey, why did you make that check-in? What was the software changes that went into that? And keeping track record of that. That's the kind of regulation you have to deal with as a bank. And is Google ready to do that? If the answer is yes, of course, they can play in this space, or Apple, for say. If they are not, I think what you will see is essentially unbundling, where the customer-facing side might be owned by different companies, but the back end, the risk management side, the regulation part, the compliance part is still owned by a bank. So that potential one way of how this could evolve. And you will see in insurance, who is offering your auto insurance might change. People who understand, like, is Tesla already offering its own car insurance? I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
That's
But
right.
they do have the amazing data points to make call on how to better risk, understand the risk of insuring that car driver for a Tesla driver. That information doesn't exist with the insurance company. So I can see why they would be interested in, but then associated with the car insurance business, you have other 15,000 things that you have to worry about. Is Tesla ready to take on that risk, or does it believe it has a value proposition to play at that part in the at scale? And I think again, it's a good decision for them would be to unbundle that piece, own part of the risk, and let the other insurance company own the rest of the risk. So again, there's the beauty. The way I see is, and the whole space is evolving, and that's going back to the entrepreneur point of view. So much is happening in this space. So much is being reimagined. That gives you an amazing opportunity as an entrepreneur to relook and rethink some of the old assumptions in this space. And and whether that is Google's of the world reimagining, or the banks of the world, or even a startup back in Bangalore, or in Tel Aviv, or in London, or in San Francisco thinking, I think who will be a winner is to be decided. I don't think so. It's too early to make that call.
Yep. That's a good point. It's hard to say, and the way you described it, what I see is it's a landscape where multiple players are going to be addressing different parts of the financial stack. And as a case in point, will the question that I asked, right? Will someone like Google become the next big financial services player? If I hear you right, I guess what you're saying is that, look, Google provides various parts of the stack. Apoorv he had referenced the Google Contact Center, which I had actually also tried out. It's an amazing product, thanks to Apoorv and his team. But one example for all your entrepreneurs out there would be, Google has invested a lot of money and made a fantastic stack for contact center as a service, right? And if you want to innovate in the financial services space, maybe what it will evolve into is the likes of Google and AWS will provide these contact center as a service, right? These robo advisors as a service. But for everything else, right, ensuring the regulations are met, ensuring transactions happen, you would still need the big banks to make sure that works. And in the midst of all that, there might be someone who needs to just bring all these pieces together, right? And that's where maybe the entrepreneurial opportunities are, to just integrate Google Contact Center with a bank, with, say, a credit union who may not have the wherewithal to have a contact center service. So it's an interesting landscape, but I don't think it necessarily will evolve into just one a winner takes all. I think it will be more of a co-op thing rather than competition. They will all kind of work together, and thanks to the power of these REST-based APIs and the power of the internet, I think you will start seeing multiple services being used by multiple vendors and cloud providers. Apoorv, so one question that has been coming up from folks, one of the references you made was around, well, you get the example of Tesla. That's a good one, because Tesla is often, forget even tech, it's seen as a car company. What's a car company doing in financial services? But as you rightly pointed out, but they have a lot of data, right? When you have data, you can start doing a lot of things, including, something we also do at in our programs at Great Learning. In fact, there's this one coming up, with the MIT faculty on Applied Data Science. It's a great bootcamp. I would encourage a lot of you to look into it. But that's where we also help you look at the data to predict the risk of somebody, defaulting if you were to provide insurance to them. And looks like Tesla's doing that. But Apoorv, one of the questions, I think this one was asked by Narayanan, was that, well, I get that, but data, the likes of Tesla have data. the likes of, these big banks have the data. The likes of your, you mentioned cloud providers are more customer facing, like your Amazon has tons and tons of data. But what about me? I want to innovate in the space. Where do I get this data that I need, which is, one of the essential pillars for me to run my AI services and help get some insights? Could you help us give a sense for where would we get the data? First of all, I guess two questions. Do we need a lot of data to apply AI, machine learning on financial services and innovate on products? That's one. And whether we need a lot of data or less data, if it's less data, that's good, because if you can work with sparse data, great, right? But where do we get this data? Any thoughts there, Apoorv?
Happy to. So again, there's a lot of myth about AI and data, and those, like, you need a lot of AI data to build sophisticated AI models. There's truth to it, of course, but not all use cases in AI need a lot of data, number one. So that's myth number one, I would say. Like, I'll try to just debunk some of these myths. So you don't need a lot of data for all kind of use cases. There are very specific use cases where you need more data is always good, but in a lot of cases not. And we can go into details of what use cases are. The second is assuming that the Googles or the JP Morgans or the Goldmans of the world have a lot of data is also a false assumption. They might have a lot of data, but is that data relevant or informative to make decisions is an open question. So I think it's important to understand it's not just that you need to have a lot of data, you need to have a right kind of data which has enough signal for you to generate decisions. So I think just having a lot amount of data is not good enough. And in a lot of cases, the large incumbents do not have the right amount of data, right type of data, I shouldn't say amount. And the third is in this, as you are reinventing this space, and as I said, in the financial services, every piece of the puzzle is being sort of unbundled and reinvented. The people who own an end-to-end flow are going to be a lot more in a better position than people who don't own the end-to-end flow. And that's the reason, because to make for AI to make decision on the end-to-end flow, like, hey, example of this would be AI advisor, wealth advisor, to give you a decision on how you should manage your retirement portfolio. It requires a lot of data outside what exists in your trading account, in your 401k account. It needs to understand who you are, which part of your life cycle you are in, what are the risks you face, your own insecurities and things you want to mitigate against, and so on and so forth. That doesn't exist anywhere. And neither Google has that information, neither banks have that information. So you will increasingly see, and with consumers themselves getting more aware, they own their own data, nobody else owns. There's probably a need for data aggregators, that a third-party data aggregator that collate data from multiple sources into one place. And nobody trusts one particular person or company to own all amount of data, all kind of data. So there's an opportunity there as an entrepreneur to create that aggregators as a third-party independent aggregators, and you're already seeing that happen in the financial services industry. So again, there are quite a few myths around data. It's important as an entrepreneur or anybody looking in the space to understand, to apply AI, what kind of data you need, number one. Do you have the right kind of data? And do you have the right end-to-end process to make those data? And those are the things that I will use, not, hey, just because I'm a small company, I won't have data to start an AI company. That's not the right thing to do.
I love that answer. It's so often we all make that mistake, and thanks for dispelling these myths. So it's not about data, it's about the high quality data. It can be less data, but do you have the data with high degree of fidelity, the high signal to noise ratio? And the other observation that you made was very intriguing, that and don't be under the assumption that just because these guys are big, the Amazons of the world, these big banks, just because they're big, that doesn't mean they have this high quality data. Often a lot of data is noise, which is true. in my past life, I used to work at Qualtrics, and we used to mine a lot of social media data. And guess what? Especially now, in what we call as fake news, right? There's so much noise that just because you can mine the whole web doesn't mean you got all the data you need. Often there's a lot of noise and it's hard to get the signal. And the last observation Apoorv made is that, look, there's probably an opportunity here, guys, for someone who can help curate that data, right, and aggregate the high quality data. I know that Apoorv's one of his classmates from IIT Bombay, Abraham Thomas, he went on to start a company that aggregates what they call in the financial services space as alternative data. And this was extremely valuable for all the hedge funds and the investment banks. And there are people who are doing that, and they are, have great companies that just started on the business of collecting high quality data. Great. I would love to, it's hard. This is, by the way, an amazing discussion. Time is just flying by. In the little time that I have, I'd love to jump into some career-focused questions. But before that, there's one question that Mohammed was asking for a while, so I thought I'll just quickly sneak that in. Apoorv, again, back to the entrepreneurs. Looks like, by the way, a lot of entrepreneurs in this group. They're all looking at. You mentioned cloud, you mentioned AI, and a lot of them I see are also ex-students who are innovating on both, cloud-based services, AI as a service. And one of the questions they have is, who is going to be the buyer of these kind of innovations? Is it going to be the big banks, these financial service institutions who will buy our products, or are we do you think there's a market for retail, which is directly go to the consumer and sell them our products? Any sense there, Apoorv, on for entrepreneurs? Where do you see them having to focus on? Should they be knocking on the doors of banks and providing AI as a service, or should they be reaching out to your consumers and selling innovations there?
I as a former entrepreneur, I will give advice: build a company where your personal, where your expertise. Building a consumer-focused company is a very different ballgame than building a B2B company. So I think, of course, and in my view, there are opportunity in both. I think building a consumer-focused financial services company requires a lot of capital, and building a B2B company does require good capital, especially in selling into large institutions is never easy. And so, especially because especially in the US, there's always a customer concentration risk, in the sense there are only 15, 20, 30, 40 companies in the world, financial services, that will buy your product if you're building specific into the financial services. So as a result, you have to take that into account. And so selling into that business, that accounts is never easy. But if you do win and penetrate that account, that is extremely valuable competitive mode for you as an entrepreneur. So again, they're very, very different games. So I would say, as when I sit here, I would say there's opportunity on both sides, and you rather use your own experience and your expertise and to focus on one. Again, and this answer will change by geography. Again, this is my personal view. It's easier probably to start a consumer-focused financial services in countries like India, where a lot of the traditional financial services are not sophisticated enough, or the penetration market share of those services is very low. So there's much more white spaces. Here in the US, it's a very crowded space. Not that you are all not seeing amazing fintech, consumer-focused fintech evolving. Robinhood is a classic example of one, selling brokerage services to consumers directly. But the level of competition is very different. Level of sophistication is very different, so on and so forth. So it's a very complicated answer. I wouldn't probably give you. I would rather go back to what are your strengths and build a company around that.
Yep. So that is good feedback, and especially coming from Apoorv, as you all know, is a repeat entrepreneur, and of course continue to bring on entrepreneurship at his time at Google and JP Morgan as well. So this is great advice, Apoorv. Just focus on your strengths, and everything else will fall in place. Let me just shift focus a bit, and I know that a lot of questions, there's a whole stream of questions, and I wish I could just take them all. But what I can do is, we can compile those questions, and we have, at Great Learning, we have industry experts in the financial services space, especially who focus on, data scientists in financial services. And what we can do is compile these questions and answer them. Yeah, so please feel free to send your questions. It's just, given Apoorv's time, I wish we could have a twin of Apoorv that we could just have to answer, looks like questions which might take us the whole day. But just shifting tracks a bit, because there are a lot of questions now coming up around jobs, right? So Apoorv, so there's, Vicky asking, there's Satish asking. So if you had to advise someone, or let me put it this way, you mentioned about how you are hiring data scientists, hiring at JP Morgan, and I'm sure you are not alone. All the big banks, and I guess even the cloud companies, are now increasingly hiring folks who have a data science background, for innovations in financial services. As you think about hiring people, what skills do you look for? What would be your advice to all of us here who are embarking on learning data science and would like to get into financial services? Any thoughts there, Apoorv, on what you look for in a candidate?
So, great question. A quick plug: we are hiring in New York, Bay Area, and in Bangalore. Those are my chief places where I'm hiring. So please reach out on my LinkedIn if anybody interested. So we are hiring data scientists, machine learning engineers, cloud engineers in my team. To answer the question, I think the way I evaluate who I hire is based on the problem set that I'm asking them to work on. So within AI, there's what I call research problems. Building an AI simulator for financial market is a classic example. It's still very complex problem. Requires a PhD in AI, and so you probably, if you want to tackle those problems, I would look at top tier university, a PhD program in that. That's one. Other big piece is a lot of AI is getting commoditized in the sense sophisticated tools are being invented at places, open sourced, and so on and so forth. That if you are a good hacker mentality, which you need not be a PhD in AI, but you are enough understanding, but more importantly, you are a good user of those tools and put together very complex solutions. That is another skill set I hire for typically. And this is where you don't need even a master's, but what you need is familiarity with these tools. And I would say that probably didn't exist 5 years back, but that increasingly AI tooling is getting commoditized. And I keep going, always give this example. I built Ocati, a mobile payment company, back in 2010 and 12. And I remember at that time, getting a top-notch mobile app developer on iPhone would cost me around $200,000, $300,000. And the same sophisticated mobile app can be built today for less than $5,000 to $10,000. And what has happened in the last 10 years, amazing mobile app development tools have come up. And the same thing is happening in AI. In the next 5 years, AI tooling is going to get so sophisticated. You can do amazing AI work using very good tools. You don't need that skill set. What you need is ability to understand how to use this skill set tools. So I hire for that skill set as well. A much more of a hacker mentality who can understand and build together a concourse solution, but with a very strong engineering thinking. I love people with first principles thinking because that is, as an engineer, that stays with you for the rest of your life, whatever technology you're using. And the third is we are hiring for data engineers. Data is another skill set that is going to be increasingly ability to manipulate data, build pipelines, understand data quality issues is another area that if you are thinking about embarking on a career in this space, that's another area to think about. So those are the three areas that we are hiring.
I love that. I love well, firstly, thank you for letting us know, because a lot of us here are looking at, jobs in data science, in financial services, and it's great to know. As you heard Apoorv say, if any of you are interested, feel free to reach out to us. We can also funnel these over to Apoorv. You can reach out to us at info@mygreatlearning.com. And we are happy to funnel some great candidates over. Apoorv, you also mentioned about how what you're looking for are folks. Of course, there's one category which is more research level problems where you're looking for PhDs, but I also like what you mentioned that, look, you don't have to have a master's. What what you're looking for is somebody who can think from first principles, who has the strong foundations. And secondly, who has that, you mentioned the hacker mentality, who has that experience of just rolling up your sleeves and just, building those pipelines, just hacking with the code and just getting to those insights and those decisions, right? By going to those troves of data. And this is where for those of you who are interested, and this is where I'm really passionate about, because I'm a big believer of that. And you don't have to go to Boston, right, to an MIT or a Palo Alto, to Stanford and these institutes. What we need is someone who has that passion to hack around with data, to understand data, to have the basic foundations. In fact, one of our programs, this Applied Data Science Bootcamp that is starting on, I believe, October 19th, is the one where we are bringing, you don't have to, as I mentioned, you don't have to go to a MIT. We are bringing these faculty who are going to be teaching these very concepts, these fundamentals. In fact, one of them is also going to be touching upon financial services and the innovations there, and how to apply, how to think about data from first principles and how to apply that, right? It's a lot about you learn the concepts, but then you apply it. And then we have our financial services industry experts who help assess what you've done. So you learn, apply, assess. You learn, apply, assess. You do that week over week over week, so that you build that hacker mentality that Apoorv is talking about, right? You build that strong foundation of, the first principles, think from first principles, understand statistics, understand data, and then more importantly, apply it. Because at the end of the day, what you really look for is, can I make sense of the data? Can I filter out? Can I build that technique for bringing out the signals from the noise and use that signals to get to insights? And don't just stop there, but also make decisions, right? And that's key. So glad to know, Apoorv, that this is kind of the skill set you're looking for. It's big, because not all of us, have the time to get a master's. Not all of us have the time to, definitely don't have the time to go get a PhD. We are all working professionals. We all have a million other things that we are juggling. And is there something that we can do to get our skills built up and hopefully, get that job at a JP Morgan? Great. We, in the midst of all this, Apoorv, as I mentioned, I wish your parents had another twin of you, but we have to have this one of you. But thanks so much for your time. I can't tell you how much the questions are still continuing to pour in. And I apologize to everyone else whose questions I could not take. However, please send in your questions and we will compile it. We will have our at Great Learning, our mentors, especially those who specialize in financial services, to help answer that. And, let's take Apoorv on his offer. If any of you have that background in data science, have that background in financial services, but most importantly, have that, the hacker mentality and that passion to deal with data and just work from first principles, let us know. I know that many of our students who graduate, almost all of them, we emphasize that. So I'd love to hear from our students here. And for those of you who are not, that's fine too. Just reach out to us and we would love to help you there as well. With that, Apoorv, I thank you so much for your time. And on behalf of everyone, really appreciate it. Yeah. And good luck with all the awesome things you're going to be doing at JP Morgan. I saw firsthand how you, transform cloud AI at Google. And I can only imagine the heights that you're going to take JP Morgan to. So thank you.
Thank you, Milind, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you.